Yes, guys, how you doing? Welcome back to Sean Butler TV. I hope you're all happy and healthy, doing the things you love, with those you love to do them with. Guys, we've got an absolute monster of a story here that I have to talk you through, because I think this one needs to be brought to everyone's attention. If you haven't heard, then on the 29th of September, a massive deal, the biggest deal, the largest buyout in history, took place on the stock exchange in America. Electronic Arts, massive sponsors of the Premier League, the shirt sponsors on the collar, on the shirt sleeve here, for £200 million, and of course, obviously, the behemoth behind the Premier League's, the EAFC gaming franchise, was bought out. It was bought out for $55 billion by a private consortium. £41 billion. Now, that might be like, okay, whatever. Well, it's important to know who bought them, guys. It's really important to know who it was that bought the gaming giant and what the ramifications are for the Premier League's clubs, as we might be seeing yet another erosion of competition, where we might see conflicts of interest fly through the roof. And if you happen to be a fan of two Premier League clubs, one of whom has been accused for the last God knows how long of egregious breaches of rules, and who recently settled with the Premier League their own lawsuit with regards associated party transactions, the other being a club whose fans have been frustrated and fed up for the last couple of years, ever since the world's wealthiest fund took them over, but yet haven't really seen the colour of their money in terms of ambition on their playing staff and their playing roster because of PSR rules. Well, they've joined forces. It's an absolute worldie of a story, and the ramifications, as I say, could be quite momentous. Guys, we're going to get into it right now. Please do smash the like button if you enjoy this sort of business of football content. Hit the subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the notification bell and drop a comment. Let me know your thoughts on this one. Let's talk about this for a second, shall we? Right. So the deal is $55 billion. EA Sports taken private, taken away from the kind of ability to trade the shares on the American Stock Exchange. The share price was trading at $210, or the deal was at $210 per EA share, which is a 25% premium over the price that was being traded on the pre-announcement to the news. The people that are buying the club, it's a consortium, guys, led by Saudi Arabia's public investment fund, the PIF, who, of course, we know are Newcastle United's owners, and Silver Lake Partners, who are Manchester City stakeholders via the City Football Group. And if I'm not mistaken, their largest stakeholder. And the third party is Affinity Partners, who is Jared Kushner's Saudi-backed investment firm. Now, we know EA Sports, right? They, like I say, they are the sponsors of the shirt sponsors of the Premier League clubs. They also are the manufacturers of the biggest game regarding soccer, football, whatever, on the planet. And so there's a little bit of an oversight here that we need to look into. Just to give you a bit of details on the deal, right? The funding is in cash contributions from PIF and Silver Lake and Affinity, plus equity rollover from EA insiders. And it does include leveraged financing, but there's not an excessive amount of debt on the business, which is irrelevant to most football fans. Listen, from a PIF perspective, they already had a 9.9% stake in EA, which is amplifying their influence in the gaming market via their Savvy Games group. So the announcement came, guys, on the 29th of September, just a few days ago. And the expected closure of the deal, which is possibly why you haven't heard too much about this yet, it's a little bit in the future, Q1 of fiscal 2027. So in about 14 or 15 months' time, it has to go through some regulatory approvals with regards to the FTC in America for competition laws. And also it should, and I really hope it will be, looked at and reviewed by the Premier League's APT scrutiny. Now, as I said to you in a moment ago, we've just seen in the last couple of weeks that Manchester City, whose owners are in part the Silver Lake Group, Well, they settled with the Premier League on their previous assertions that the APT rules were not fit for purpose. They were essentially illegal against business competition laws. And in the settlement, they did acknowledge that the rules are fine and fair and reasonable and all that stuff. But as a part of that consequence and that compromise, they were allowed, or they're going to be approved, to pass their previously offered APT rule with regards to Etihad that was rejected prior. Now it's going to be approved and is valued at £1 billion, which is, again, miles above any other particular deal with any other similar APT anywhere else in world football. And because of something called the escalator rule, which is essentially over the course of the contract, which in the regards to the Etihad deal is 10 years long, the notion should be that you shouldn't be diluted by inflation, and that there should be kickers that can be put into those contracts. And so what is a £1 billion, £100 million a year, 10-year contract actually will turn out to be something closer to 1.5 or 1.75 billion because of that escalator rule. Well, on top of that, Silver Lake have just jumped into bed with the PIF fund via Savvy Games to get on board Electronic Arts. And as I say, the ramifications for the Premier League and for competition generally with PSR and FFP are quite staggering. Let's talk about how that looks for a second. Well, first of all, the benefits and the pros for Manchester City fans and Newcastle fans are quite extraordinary, right? So there'll be a financial boost, right? Enhanced APTs. Think about the I think it's a seller or sealer deal, and the Etihad style deals, of which Newcastle and Manchester City are already getting already a part of. There'll be increased revenue from that, which will help them lift their PSR frameworks and their thresholds, which will obviously allow them to show even more ambition. Now, Manchester City can basically do what they want, spend what they want anyway, despite the fact that there's been, 115 or 130 charges that have been levied against them for the best part of, 2 or 3 years that still haven't been resolved yet, even though we were promised it would be resolved by March, and that the final decision was actually made last October, so a year ago. We still haven't heard any conclusions on that. The longer it goes on, the more likely it is that they're probably going to settle for basically a slap on the wrist, as seems to be the case with all of these things. From a Newcastle fan's perspective, it's great news for them, obviously, right? Just in the financial growth, it sort of raises that kind of that revenue threshold that allows them to spend more money. And the other sort of benefits here, the other ways that they can generate the money to raise the PSR threshold, which traditionally most clubs think is usually doable via investment into infrastructure. So things like spending money on new stadiums, improving on stadiums, commercial deals, hospitality, training ground, all of those things that can kind of raise the revenue generating aspects of the football club, but whereby the money that can be put into the football club doesn't affect the costing structures of the PSR and the FFP for both the Premier League and for UEFA. The other areas, though, right, you have to think about this for a second. This is Electronic Arts. Now, what Electronic Arts do? This is their football game. So forget about the sponsorship deals. And I think that one of the benefits for everybody here will be that the fact is that there'll probably likely be more money coming into that sponsorship deal. So everybody in the Premier League will likely have some sort of incremental lift in their own revenues from that. But if the owners of Electronic Arts have a direct ownership relationship with Manchester City and with Newcastle United, then you can imagine the various other angles of potential future revenue raising strategies are going to be steered towards them rather than others. And in the case of the FIFA football game, the FC 25 or FC 26, well, obviously there's lots of ways that they can do that, right? There's, from a tech perspective, they could do virtual reality tours baked within the game that only really affect Manchester City and Newcastle, and everybody else gets sort of left behind. They could have competitions and incentives and methods and mechanisms that are baked into the game that essentially steer the attention of the younger generation who are playing that game towards teams like Manchester City and Newcastle United and away from other teams. They can steer the quality scores, the profile plays of all of the different players in a way that is kind of a little bit under the surface, but essentially pushes more attention to the next generation of potential football fans into the minds and the hearts and minds of Newcastle United Football Club and also Manchester City or by a little bit of sort of diversionary tactics away from those competitive elements like Arsenal, Liverpool, Chelsea, Tottenham, Burnley, whoever else, Brighton, etc. So it's quite. It could be seen as quite a sort of devious mechanism in which to get over one of the problems that is definitely real around football, which is how much money does it cost to buy tickets for a family to go to watch your team play? As a Tottenham fan, I know that Tottenham fans have many in the online space. We have loads of conversations around how expensive the tickets are for Tottenham, and essentially, if you are the bread earner of a traditional family of say yourself, the wife, and two kids, then sometimes for some games with the cost of travel and the hospitality and the burgers and beers and all those different things, parking, whatever, plus the tickets to access the stadium. A day out could cost you well north of £500-600, which is prohibitive. And so there's a fear that because of this kind of commercialization of football, that the next generation are getting priced out of seeing games of football. Well, maybe a really very, very clever mechanism here from buying Electronic Arts, from Newcastle United's owners, and from Silver Lake Manchester City stakeholders is to essentially go and find the next generation of fans where they are and not have to worry about where you want them to be, which is in the stadium. And you can do that via the e-games, esports world. So it's quite, it's very clever. I don't hate it, but what I am concerned about is the fact that a major sponsor of the Premier League and a major avenue for people that participate in the Premier League and the game of sport, the game of football generally, is now under the same remit of control as people that do have direct access to and responsibility for the outcomes of only a couple of those teams more so than anybody else. I think there is a massive conflict here that needs to be looked at. I mean, there's a pro in terms of, like I say, shared EA sponsorship revenue is around 10 to 20 million pound, or sorry, around 10 million pound per club annually at the moment. But if there's more of that that's coming in because of these owners, then everybody will be a small beneficiary, and that might be the kind of the carrot that is offered to get everybody to be on board this. Remember that the last, I think, 3 Premier League owners meetings where they get together every quarter to discuss whether or not things like the PSR rules are currently fair and appropriate, whether or not the FFP rules are currently fair and appropriate, how the relationship with the UEFA rules, all of those things, there has been no changes. And more recently, again, from a Tottenham perspective, the poster boy around levelling the playing field, Tottenham Hotspur's ex-chairman Daniel Levy, he's now gone. And so if he used to be a part of the kind of group that was pushing against those sorts of rules, against the ability for these things to happen, if he's out of the way and new people are coming in to Tottenham, then that's another stumbling block, another hurdle out of the way of those people with very deep pockets that can remove any particular ability for the rules to tighten, for the economy of football to become more balanced and more even and more distributed fairly. And it can kind of be a little bit of a cloak and dagger mechanism here, in my opinion, whereby essentially the people, the haves, get more access, more ambition, and the gap increases as we move forward. As I say, the PSR rules and FFP rules have never been fit for purpose. My frustrations with these things are not aimed at the fans of any particular club. It's not their fault. It's not the club's fault for wanting to have the ambition or the owners. It's the ability for me, for the people that make the rules and the laws, to be able to create a cohesive, coherent set of rules that are enforceable. And when you look at the fact that Manchester City have all those charges that are unresolved, Chelsea having now 74 additional charges against them that are unresolved, and you look at what happened to Everton, you look at what happened to Nottingham Forest, and it always seems like the clamping down and the punishment goes on to the less able, the less capable, and the less resourced than it does on the people at the top. It feels like, to me, the best way to summarize it is essentially a closing of the door after the horse has bolted. But with regards to this particular story, another analogy that I might use would be like saying, with regards the owners of EA Sports also being the owners of 2 particular clubs within the division of which that EA Sports operates and sponsors. It feels like your landlord also buying your grocery store next door and controlling a little bit too much of your revenue, your spend, and your existence. And I think it's a dangerous, slippery slope that unless curtailed and discussed in open forum is just another example of the dilution of merit and the dilution of competitive fairness in the game. But I know that's going to antagonize some of you who think that, especially Newcastle fans potentially, who think that, you know, that they've been hard done by in the last couple of years by the ambitions of their owners, the ambitions of the football club and the fans not being able to do the dancing around of the FFP rules like everybody else seems to do. And I guess maybe you're going to sit there and think, well, if you can't beat them, join them. But I would ask all of you to sort of open your mind a little bit to the integrity of the game and whether we should be championing more of these sorts of deals that essentially just look like there's a massive conflict of interest regarding where the money's coming from, who it's coming from, who it's coming from, where it's coming from, where it's going to, and where the kind of like I say, the cloak and dagger mechanisms can be implemented. Think about not just the within the EA game, but you could also have, as I say, virtual reality tours as well, all sorts of tech implementation, artificial intelligence that can come from people that know how to do that within the electronic arts world, and then putting that into the sports hemisphere within football. It seems like a dream come true if you're a Manchester City or a Newcastle United fan, but for the rest of us, I'm not sure it is as clean and clear and without compromise as is being suggested. Let's leave it there, guys. I think it's a perfect time to just sort of bring that to your attention. And I want to get your thoughts on that. Are you okay with the fact that the owners of Newcastle United and Manchester City have teamed up, and with them and with Jared Kushner's investment firm have bought for a private record takeover of a company of $55 billion, a company that has a direct influence and direct access to the next generation of football fans. And listen, to be honest, it's not just kids that play EA, it's everybody else. But with the mechanisms and the ability then to kind of do discrete steerings of opportunity, access and influence and incentive towards certain clubs over others, now that they have one sort of finger in that particular pie. Is that okay with you? Is it okay with you that a major sponsor of the Premier League is also an owner of two of the Premier League clubs? Let me know your thoughts, guys. Like, subscribe, and comment, and I'll see you on the next one. And as always,